Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Italy.
Please, everybody have a seat. Salve. Once again, I want to welcome Prime Minister Renzi and his delegation back to the White House. As we all saw this morning, Matteo's English is much better than my Italian. Michelle and I are looking forward to hosting Matteo and Agnese at tonight's state dinner. But as I believe our Italian friends say, prima il dovere, poi il piacere, which means first duty, then pleasure. Tonight's dinner will be a pleasure. Today we're focused on our duties, our work to advance the security and the prosperity of our peoples. I want to begin once again by expressing our deep gratitude as Americans for the extraordinary alliance with Italy. The United States is lucky to have many strong allies around the world. Few are as strong and as reliable and as capable as Italy. In good times and in bad, we can count on each other. And I want to thank the government and the people of Italy for the hospitality and the generosity they show to the many American military personnel and families who are stationed in Italy far away from home. Matteo, please also know that our thoughts continue to be with the people of Amatrice, and I know that you're still working closely with local governments there to recover and rebuild from the devastating earthquake that took place this summer. In our work together over the past 2 years, I've come to count on Prime Minister Renzi as one of my closest partners and friends on the world stage. By virtue of his progressive vision, his energy, the reforms that he's pursuing, which are sweeping, the bold vision that he has for Italy and the world, I think Matteo embodies a new generation of leadership, not just for Italy, but also for Europe. And this is critically important because as I've said repeatedly over the last several years, a strong and united and confident and prosperous Europe, anchored in liberal traditions and democracy and rights, that's a necessity for the United States, and it's a necessity for the world. It's a strategic interest of ours that we have a successful, united Europe. And today, we focused on a number of key challenges facing Europe, our transatlantic alliance, and the globe. On the economic front, we agree that our focus has to remain on growth, creating jobs and prosperity for our people. Matteo's been pursuing some very bold economic reforms, structural reforms in Italy that are not easy, that are often resisted by existing institutions and inertia. But the Italian economy has shown signs of growth. It still has a long way to go to put Italy on a path to long-term and sustainable growth, and the upcoming referendum to modernize Italy's political institutions are something the United States strongly supports because we believe that it will help accelerate Italy's path towards a more vibrant, dynamic economy as well as a more responsive political system. Matteo shared his thoughts on how, in the wake of Brexit, the European Union can move forward and focus on delivering security and prosperity that Europeans deserve. And we both agreed that without an emphasis on demand and growth and investment in infrastructure and projects that can put people back to work, particularly young people, that much of the economic fragility in Europe will continue. And by the way, that has an impact around the world, including on the American economy as well. We both reaffirmed our strong support for negotiations around the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, which can support jobs and exports and innovation and growth on both sides of the Atlantic. We talked about, as NATO allies, our unified determination to defend every ally and to continue to strengthen NATO's defense and deterrence posture. Italy will be a key contributor to NATO's Joint Task Force, which is now operational and can deploy anywhere in Europe on short notice. We discussed our shared concerns around the situation in Ukraine and the importance of keeping sanctions, including EU sanctions, in place until Russia and Ukraine are both implementing commitments under the Minsk Agreement. And we are determined to work diplomatically with the Normandy Group in order to achieve that goal. I thanked Italy very strongly for its leading role in the coalition against ISIL. After the United States, Italy is the second largest contributor of forces in Iraq. Italian forces are helping to stabilize cities through its training of police after they are liberated from ISIL. The start of Iraqi operations to liberate Mosul is another major step forward. Mosul, as many of you know, is Iraq's second largest city, and ISIL has been entrenched there for more than 2 years. Perhaps 1 million civilians are still living there. And so in addition to rooting out ISIL, our focus jointly is on the safety and the humanitarian aid for civilians who are escaping the fighting. That's going to be a top priority for both our governments. Mosul will be a difficult fight, and there will be advances and there will be setbacks, but I am confident that just as ISIL's been defeated in communities across Iraq, ISIL will be defeated in Mosul as well, and that will be another step towards their ultimate destruction. Meanwhile, Italy continues to be one of our strongest counterterrorism partners as we work together to prevent terrorist attacks in our countries. More broadly, we agreed to continue our strong support of the Libyan government of national accord, which, as we've seen in recent days, continues to face challenges to its authority. Italy provided critical diplomatic support to Libya's efforts to forge the government. Together, we intend to continue to support the government of national accord as it works to eject ISIL from Libya, provide stability and services throughout the country. And as ISIL tries to expand its presence in Afghanistan, Italy continues to play a vital role as we train and assist Afghan forces and support Afghan development. We discussed the continued need for strong, coordinated responses to the largest migrant and refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. As the leader of EU's naval operations in the Mediterranean, Italy and its partners have helped to save hundreds of thousands of lives. As NATO agreed in Warsaw, the alliance is moving ahead with plans to increase its support of these EU operations. And Matteo, I want to commend you and the Italian people, the leadership in Europe that you have shown as an eloquent voice for a collective, orderly, and humane response to this crisis is in keeping with our values and our shared commitment to human dignity. And finally, the past 2 weeks have been a powerful reminder that when our countries work together, we can leave the world a little bit better than we found it. Because the United States and Italy joined with other nations across the globe, we've brought the Paris Agreement on climate change into force. We reached an agreement to limit aviation emissions, and through the Montreal Protocol, nearly 200 nations just this past week agreed to phase down production and consumption of dangerous hydrofluorocarbons, which are an enormous contributor to greenhouse gases and a major step towards achieving the goals that we set in Paris. Meanwhile, Italy continues to be a strong partner for development, especially to combat hunger and malnutrition around the world. So, once again, Matteo, thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your partnership. I could not ask for a better partner, and the American people could not ask for a better friend and ally than Italy. So, grazie.
I'm not sure your Italian is worse than my English because you improve very quickly your Italian. Mr. President, grazie mille, grazie di cuore per l'accoglienza. Quello che abbiamo detto circa il grande onore che è oggi presente qua per l'Italia lo confermo e lo ribadisco con grande forza. Ma come ha detto il Presidente Obama, il nostro incontro è stato anche l'occasione per discutere prima il dovere, poi il piacere delle questioni che più riguardano il nostro momento politico. Ringrazio gli Stati Uniti d'America per lo straordinario supporto nella battaglia che l'Italia sta facendo nel nostro Paese e a livello europeo per affermare un paradigma di crescita e non soltanto di austerity a tutti i livelli. Gli Stati Uniti sono un modello da questo punto di vista. 2008-2016 costantemente il vostro Paese ha indicato la via su come uscire dalla crisi più grande del dopoguerra. E io penso che l'Europa possa e debba fare di più. L'Italia considera l'esempio americano come il punto di riferimento di questa battaglia. Naturalmente sappiamo che bisogna fare i compiti a casa propria e quindi le riforme strutturali e quindi ciò che il Presidente ha ricordato in ordine alle varie priorità che abbiamo dato, cominciando dalla riforma del mercato del lavoro. Io mi sono dovuto scusare col Presidente per aver utilizzato l'espressione Jobs Act, che è un'espressione copiata, ma come ci siamo detti è open source, possiamo copiare l'espressione dalla grande iniziativa della Presidenza Obama. Questa scelta ha portato 588.000 posti di lavoro in più, che per l'Italia sono ancora non sufficienti, ma un primo passo per uscire finalmente dalla situazione di difficoltà. Grazie al Presidente Obama anche per il lavoro di leadership nel campo energetico. L'Italia è oggi tra le principali nazioni che sostiene la visione di Parigi e della COP21. Andremo a lavorare anche a Marrakech nel prossimo novembre e nei prossimi anni continueremo in questa direzione per un'energia pulita e per un ambiente sostenibile per i nostri figli. E grazie per il lavoro che abbiamo svolto insieme in campo culturale. Io credo che siamo di fronte a una stagione della vita politica in cui, mentre qualcuno sceglie l'odio e la cultura dell'intolleranza, noi abbiamo bisogno di scommettere sulla libertà, sulla nostra identità, sui valori che hanno fatto straordinario questo Paese e l'Europa. E l'Europa ha un disperato bisogno di ritrovare la propria anima, lo deve ai suoi figli, lo deve ai suoi nipoti. Dunque questo è il primo grande tema di discussione che abbiamo condiviso con il Presidente Obama. Da parte italiana l'impegno perché il G7 del 2017 a Taormina, nella bella Sicilia, possa essere un appuntamento importante e rilevante, e l'impegno perché il lavoro che abbiamo iniziato insieme sotto, caro Presidente, la tua leadership possa continuare. La legacy del Presidente Obama non sarà soltanto negli Stati Uniti, questo deve essere molto chiaro e molto forte, ma coinvolgerà profondamente anche l'Europa e noi ci sentiamo impegnati in questa direzione. Voglio infine brevemente, prima di parlare di politica internazionale, ringraziare per un passaggio, quello su Amatrice. Amatrice è un piccolo paese del centro Italia piegato da un terremoto drammatico come i paesi vicini, Arquata, Accumoli, ma è anche il paese dove è nata la pasta alla matriciana, che è uno dei prodotti tipici italiani. E allora quella piccola comunità di Amatrice, che ha avuto tanti morti, che ha avuto decine di morti, non si è piegata. Caro Presidente, quando verrai a visitare l'Italia nei prossimi mesi, io credo che ti faremo assaggiare, grazie ai cuochi di Amatrice, una delle più buone paste che tu abbia mai assaggiato, e in particolar modo la pasta alla matriciana. Credo che sia un modo anche per dire a quella comunità piegata dal terremoto che il cibo può essere elemento di identità e di futuro. Sulle questioni internazionali, infine, l'agenda italiana coincide totalmente con l'agenda americana. Noi siamo convinti della necessità di affermare valori di convivenza, civiltà e dialogo in tutto il mondo. Per questo il nostro impegno continua a fianco della coalizione internazionale in tutti i teatri, a cominciare da quello difficile dell'Iraq e di Mosul, dove truppe italiane sono a sostegno di un'operazione di salvataggio della diga di Mosul, a cominciare dall'Afghanistan, a cominciare dai vari teatri. Ciò che secondo noi è fondamentale e cruciale è che non cediamo alla cultura della paura. Il futuro è storicamente impossibile da prevedere, ma se c'è una grande eredità del sogno americano che il futuro è un luogo meraviglioso dove andare e dove incamminarsi. Recentemente tante polemiche sulla innovazione e la tecnologia hanno portato a considerare il futuro una minaccia. Io sono certo che i valori degli Stati Uniti e dell'Italia, mai così forti come adesso, potranno aiutare in particolar modo le nuove generazioni a considerare il futuro non solo come una minaccia, ma anche come una grande opportunità. E per tutti questi motivi l'agenda che oggi gli Stati Uniti ci hanno presentato è un'agenda che condividiamo e sulla quale continueremo a lavorare insieme. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Okay, we're going to take a few questions, and I will start with Kevin Frecking of AP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Donald Trump says Hillary Clinton talks too tough about Vladimir Putin and that both of you insult the Russian leader. He also said that if elected, he might meet with the Russian leader before his inauguration. What do you think of Trump's approach to Putin, and how would it affect America's interest on the international stage? Secondly,
I can still hear.
Secondly, does it distress you that folks at the FBI and State Department talked about the proper level of classification of emails that were on Secretary Clinton's server? Would you acknowledge the appearance of impropriety, and should State Department officials look into this further? And for Prime Minister Renzi, with the critical governing referendum happening soon in your country, what would passage mean for your ability to lead that country? And what would failure mean to your political future, as well as to Italy's role in the European Union?
Well, I'm going to be a little more subdued in my discussions of the Republican nominee in this context than I might be on the campaign trail. But let me just speak broadly about Russia. When I came into office, Russia, under the previous administration, had invaded parts of Georgia, had created a frozen conflict there. There was a new president, and we tried to initiate a more constructive path with respect to U.S.-Russia relations. And I think we showed Russia plenty of respect, acknowledging enormous differences and different values, but also trying to find ways in which we could cooperate together. We initiated the new START treaty. We assisted Russia with respect to its ascension to the WTO. We worked on some common international challenges together. And when the previous president was replaced with Mr. Putin, I met with him, and we discussed again ways in which we could constructively work together. The challenge that we've had with Russia is very much centered on Russian aggression in some very particular areas around the world. In Ukraine, where they have engaged in similar conduct to what they did in Georgia. And even there, we've tried to broker and work with the Europeans to broker a Minsk agreement that would peacefully resolve those issues. In Syria, one of my earliest meetings with Putin was to suggest to him that if Assad stayed in power, given the brutality with which he had treated his own people, you would see a civil war that would not be good for the Syrians, certainly, but would not be good for the world anywhere. Rather than to work with us to try to solve the problem, he doubled down on his support for Assad, and we know the situation that exists there. So any characterization that somehow we have improperly challenged Russian aggression or have somehow tried to encroach on their legitimate interests is just wrong. And Mr. Trump's continued flattery of Mr. Putin and the degree to which he appears to model many of his policies and approaches to politics on Mr. Putin is unprecedented in American politics and is out of step with not just what Democrats think, but out of step with what up until the last few months almost every Republican thought, including some of the ones who are now endorsing Mr. Trump. So you'll have to explain to me how it is that some of the same leaders of the Republican Party who were constantly haranguing us for even talking to the Russians and who consistently took the most hawkish approaches to Russia, including Mr. Trump's selection for vice president, now reconcile their endorsement of Mr. Trump with their previous views. The bottom line is that we think that Russia is a large, important country with a military that is second only to ours and has to be a part of the solution on the world stage rather than part of the problem. But their behavior has undermined international norms and international rules in ways that we have to call them out on. And anybody who occupies this office should feel the same way, because these are values that we fought for and we protected. We can't go around talking about human rights or freedom of the press or democracy or freedom of religion or non-discrimination or basic laws of war or the sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries, no matter how small, and then extol the virtues of somebody who violates those principles. And you know, Mr. Trump rarely surprises me these days. I'm much more surprised and troubled by the fact that you have Republican officials who historically have been adamantly anti-Russian and in fact have attacked me for even engaging them diplomatically, now supporting and in some cases echoing his positions. It's quite a reversal. You'll have to ask them how to explain it. With respect to the State Department and the FBI reports, I think you've heard directly from both the FBI and the State Department that the notion or the accounts that have been put out there are just not true. And you know, you can question them again, but based on what we have seen, heard, learned, some of the more sensational implications or appearances, as you stated them, aren't based on actual events and based on what actually happened. And I think derived from sort of overly broad characterizations of interactions between the State Department and the FBI that happen a lot and happen between agencies. I think that covers me.
But I know 2016 is not a very good year to organize a referendum. But I think the Italian referendum is very simply in the message, because it's about the fight against bureaucracy. And we need a great investment against bureaucracy in Italy for a lot of reasons. We changed 63 governments in 70 years. A few times we joke about it with the president, because it's unbelievable in a country have a government changed 1 year, every year. But it's normal, the discussion, the political discussion is very strong. My opinion is very easy. if in December we will win this referendum, for Italy will be more easy to continue the battle to change Europe, because structural reforms are important for Italy, but are important also for institutions in Brussels, in Europe. So the only consequence, constitutional reform apart, in the political debate, in my view, is if we win, Italy will be stronger in the debate in EU. And so I work strongly and hardly to achieve the victory. Sorry. Platero, Sole 24 Ore.
Grazie.
You are
Presidente.
American, not Italian. You are
American, I'm Italian.
American citizens.
Le farò la domanda in italiano.
Okay, thank you so much.
Or I can do it in English. Allora, restiamo sul referendum, perché certo lei si augura che possa vincere, però abbiamo incontrato molti investitori a Wall Street preoccupati dall'ipotesi che invece il referendum possa perdere. Sono investitori che hanno dato fiducia all'Italia e che minacciano, in caso di un risultato negativo sul fronte delle riforme, di andarsene. Ecco, lei cosa può dire a questi investitori per rassicurarli nel caso ci sia un voto negativo? Si impegna a restare, per esempio, e a continuare nel processo di riforme? E un'ultima cosa, questa sera porterà del vino alla cena col Presidente? Perché è un'abitudine italiana. Mr. President, I agree with the Prime Minister. Your accent is beautiful, truly beautiful. So, your Italian accent, of course.
My hands.
Yeah.
Grazie.
On growth, you seem to be in agreement that there is a need to sort of go ahead with the policy that you have pursued on being more flexible on the fiscal side. The problem is that Brussels is very rigid about it, and it's very rigid with the Italian efforts, therefore jeopardizing these efforts. What can you see to Brussels, especially after Brexit? They don't seem to be moving on that front. How important it is to move forward in that direction. And do you think that in case the referendum will not go well for the Prime Minister, he should stay on and continue in his reforms? Thank you.
Ho come l'impressione che del tutto correttamente i nostri amici americani siano leggermente più interessati al voto dell'8 novembre che non a quello italiano sulla riforma costituzionale, e anche noi peraltro. Ma nel merito per rispondere alla sua domanda, molto brevemente, questo è un momento in cui tanti investitori da tutto il mondo stanno tornando a investire in Italia. Noi siamo felici di questo, siamo felici degli investimenti sull'innovazione delle grandi realtà della tecnologia, da Apple che investe a Napoli, da Amazon che aprirà un centro di intelligenza artificiale a Torino, alle grandi realtà di tutto il mondo economico e finanziario che considera l'Italia un luogo dove poter creare opportunità e business. Dunque, porte aperte. Io non credo che vi saranno cataclismi in caso di vittoria del no al referendum, ma per non avere dubbi preferisco fare di tutto per vincere il referendum, così questo dubbio atavico che vi colpisce non avrà modo di essere testato. Quello che però è fondamentale è che passi il messaggio che questo referendum non è un referendum sui grandi temi mondiali, è un referendum molto semplice. Volete o no semplificare il sistema istituzionale italiano dando più stabilità e tempi certi alle leggi. Quindi è un sistema che vuole rendere più semplice il Paese. Rispetto alla domanda che peraltro è rivolta al Presidente sull'Europa, noi rispettiamo le regole europee e siamo totalmente dentro tutte le regole europee, anche se talvolta siamo un po' a malincuore, vorremmo regole diverse, ma finché le regole non cambiano le rispettiamo, perché l'Italia ha fatto della reputation una delle parole chiave del proprio mandato. Dunque, lavoriamo per cambiarle, ma finché ci sono queste le rispettiamo tutte. Quello che accadrà nei prossimi mesi lo vedremo, come direbbe un grande cantautore italiano, lo scopriremo solo vivendo. Quello che posso dirle è che vincerà il sì al referendum, per cui lei non avrà più problemi di fare questa domanda.
You know, during the course of my presidency, I have had repeated conversations with Brussels, with Angela, with Francois, and others around how we could most effectively recover from the crisis of 2007-2008. It is fair to say that we have made more progress more quickly. And what I've tried to point out was the reason we were able to make progress was we focused very early on in providing a large infusion of demand through our fiscal policies, rebuilding roads, bridges, investing in schools, teachers, clean energy, putting people back to work, tax cuts, put money in the pockets of consumers, saving the auto industry. But then also, what was very important was quickly trying to fix the banks and infusing capital and making sure they were more stable, more transparent, and would attract confidence so that the financial system was working again. And look, I'm proud of our economic track record. We have grown faster and created more jobs. And this past year, seen incomes rise and poverty fall more quickly than a lot of our counterparts in Europe. Now, I recognize that Europe is a more complicated collection of states, and it's more difficult to move. And some are in the Eurozone, and some are not. And so I don't expect that everything we've done can immediately translate to Europe. And there's some parts of what Europe does that we could learn from, in terms of the social safety net, for example. But what I do know is that given the very slow growth that's taken place in Europe, or contraction, over what is almost a decade now, you have a generation of European youth who are not attaching themselves to the labor market fast enough. And if you don't reverse some of those trends, then it becomes a generational loss of an income, of wealth, of economic dynamism. And now that countries like Italy and others have made real progress on their finances and their deficits, and there's more market confidence in their position, now would be a good time, I believe, to refocus attention on growth and making investments, because one of the reasons that we've been able to cut our deficits by 2/3 is not simply because we cut spending by 2/3. We disciplined spending, but we also grew fast enough that more revenue came in, and that's one of the best ways for you to arrive at a sound fiscal position. And monetary policy alone is not sufficient. I think Mario Draghi and the European Central Bank have done good work trying to maintain a positive trajectory in Europe, but ultimately there's only so much monetary policy can do if it's not combined with fiscal policy. And my hope would be that Matteo's right. Italy has been true to its word in Europe and met its obligations, but my hope would be the debate broadens as Europe moves forward around how to grow more quickly, put more people back to work, see incomes rise, create a greater sense of momentum and optimism, because I do believe that there is a connection between stagnation and some of the less constructive populist impulses that have been rising up, and those trend lines about Europe do concern me, because if you look at the European experiment over the last 40 years, I said this in Hanover, there's probably been no group of people who've enjoyed more prosperity and more peace over the last several decades than a united Europe. If it begins now splintering because their sense is the global capitals and elites are not attentive to the ordinary concerns of people, that would be a tragedy. And my hope is that that discussion, led by Matteo and others, will continue. And by the way, yes, I think if I won't weigh in on the referendum, but the reforms Matteo's initiating, certainly on the economic side, are the right ones. And in a global, internet-driven world, governments have to be able to move fast and quickly and transparently. So I am rooting for success, but I think you should hang around for a while no matter what. Aisha Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask you about the election. Donald Trump is telling his supporters that the election is rigged and asking them to monitor certain areas on Election Day. How concerned are you about the potential for violence? And what about after Election Day? Are you worried the results of the election may be distrusted? And for Prime Minister Renzi, the offensive in Mosul has begun. Are you concerned about what happens after liberation? And Mr. President, if you want to weigh in on that as well,
I do.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. One of the great things about America's democracy is we have a vigorous, sometimes bitter, political contest. And when it's done, historically, regardless of party, the person who loses the election congratulates the winner, reaffirms our democracy, and we move forward. That's how democracy survives, because we recognize that there's something more important than any individual campaign, and that is making sure that the integrity and trust in our institutions sustains itself, because democracy by definition works by consent, not by force. I have never seen in my lifetime or in modern political history any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections and the election process before votes have even taken place. It's unprecedented. It happens to be based on no facts. Every expert, regardless of political party, regardless of ideology, conservative or liberal, who has ever examined these issues in a serious way will tell you that instances of significant voter fraud are not to be found, that, keep in mind, elections are run by state and local officials, which means that there are places like Florida, for example, where you've got a Republican governor who's a Republican appointees are going to be running and monitoring a whole bunch of these election sites. The notion that somehow if Mr. Trump loses Florida, it's because of those people that you have to watch out for, that is both irresponsible And by the way, doesn't really show the kind of leadership and toughness that you'd want out of a president. If you start whining before the game's even over, if whenever things are going badly for you and you lose, you start blaming somebody else, then you don't have what it takes to be in this job. Because there are a lot of times when things don't go our way or my way. That's okay. You fight through it. You work through it. You try to accomplish your goals. But the larger point that I want to emphasize here is that there is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections, in part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time. And so I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes. And if he got the most votes, then it would be my expectation of Hillary Clinton to offer a gracious concession speech and pledge to work with him in order to make sure that the American people benefit from an effective government. And it would be my job to welcome Mr. Trump, regardless of what he said about me or my differences with him on my opinions, and escort him over to the Capitol, in which there would be a peaceful transfer of power. That's what Americans do. That's why America's already great. One way of weakening America and making it less great is if you start betraying those basic American traditions that have been bipartisan and have helped to hold together this democracy now for well over 2 centuries. With respect to Mosul, we are seeing the Iraqi forces, with the support of the coalition that includes the United States and Italy and other nations, moving forward and encircling Mosul. The intention is to drive ISIL out of what was its first major urban stronghold and what continues to be one of the key organizational and logistical and leadership hubs for ISIL. I am confident that we can succeed, although it's going to be a tough fight and a difficult fight. It is Iraqis who are doing the fighting, and they are performing effectively and bravely and taking on significant casualties. There will be ups and downs in this process, but my expectation is that ultimately it will be successful. And this will be, I think, a key milestone in what I committed to doing when ISIL first emerged, which was we were going to roll them back, and we are going to ultimately drive them out of population centers, and we will destroy them and defeat them so that they are not in a position to carry out terrorist attacks against our peoples or our friends and allies, or against innocent people inside of Iraq and Syria. And we've seen just steady progress on this front. Now, you ask a very important question, which is, if in fact we are successful, how do we deal with what could be a humanitarian crisis? Because ISIL, when it occupies these territories, it bleeds them dry. It feeds off them. It oppresses the local populations. It's not very good at governance. And so just basic functions like electricity or water start running down. People are fleeing from their homes. There will be significant displacement. This has all been part of the coalition planning process in conjunction with the United Nations, in conjunction with major aid organizations. And so we have put together plans and infrastructure for dealing with a potential humanitarian crisis that are as extensive as the military plans. That doesn't mean that we don't have to pay attention to it, and executing will be difficult. It's going to still be a tough environment to operate under, and no doubt there will be instances where we see some heartbreaking situations if, in fact, large numbers of people flee. It's hard when you leave your home. It's hard when you leave your home and you already didn't have a lot because you were living under an oppressive, barbarous regime. It's hard to leave your home in a war zone. So it's not something that I expect will be easy, but I think it perhaps hasn't been publicized enough, at least in the American press, the degree of planning and assets and resources that we're devoting to this very important problem. Because if we aren't successful in helping ordinary people as they're fleeing from ISIL, then that makes us vulnerable to seeing ISIL return and feeding on the resentments in the aftermath of Mosul being liberated. And so there's a strategic as well as humanitarian interest in us getting that right. Okay.
I think about Mosul, the considerations of President are very clear. For Italian side, we are particularly committed about dam. There is a dam, a dangerous dam, and we support an Italian company who work to restore the dam because it could be a great problem for the population. And for the rest, we are totally engaged with the rest of coalition to ensure to the Iraqi people the possibility to have a future. And let me be very great to the Italian army, particularly Italian Carabinieri, who provide in this country to learning the local police. So we are not worried for the future if we will bring Mosul, because we think soon or later we will destroy Daesh. And the reconstruction and the rebuilding will be a priority for every member of international community. Italy is engaged and work with the United States and the other alliance. Last. Prego, l'ultima. Last, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. In italiano, anzi in inglese. The Mediterranean represents a geopolitical priority for Italy, mainly because of the constant flow of migrants. And is there a common strategies on this and a common strategies on Libya? And can Italy act as a bridge between Europe and Africa? And how American administration can help the efforts of the Italian government? Because Europe sometimes leave alone Italy to face the challenge. Thank you.
Per il TG1 rispondo in italiano. Molto chiaramente la posizione nostra è sempre la stessa. L'Europa deve guardare con più convinzione all'Africa e sotto questo profilo non possiamo tutte le volte andare a chiedere un aiuto agli Stati Uniti senza fare la nostra parte. Gli Stati Uniti sono impegnati in tutti i teatri internazionali. Nei teatri più vicini noi abbiamo bisogno ovviamente del supporto e del sostegno del nostro migliore amico, perché gli Stati Uniti per noi sono questi, del best friend, ma dobbiamo anche mettere in moto una strategia a livello italiano ed europeo. Non possiamo stare sempre ad aspettare. Allora la questione del Mediterraneo e dell'Africa in generale è stata un po' abbandonata negli ultimi decenni dall'Unione Europea, dobbiamo tornare a darle priorità. Nel dare priorità dobbiamo lavorare come la Commissione aveva immaginato di fare e sta facendo, forse non con la necessaria velocità. Noi faremo la nostra parte in questa direzione sugli accordi con alcuni Stati, con i 5 Stati prioritari. Dobbiamo lavorare perché l'Africa sia una priorità anche dal punto di vista delle risorse, lo sviluppo locale, l'aumento della cooperazione internazionale. Ne parleremo in Sicilia durante il G7 del prossimo anno, ma anche l'investimento dal punto di vista politico, che forse negli ultimi anni è mancato. Dunque, prima di chiedere aiuto agli Stati Uniti, che è sempre ben accolto e ben accetto, bisogna che l'Italia e l'Europa facciano la loro parte. l'Italia aumenterà gli sforzi per la cooperazione internazionale. Nel ranking del G7 sulla cooperazione internazionale siamo stati a lungo ultimi, settimi su 7, che non è una buona posizione, e da qui al prossimo anno arriveremo al 4° posto nel ranking rispetto al PIL, al GDP che ciascuno di noi propone, quindi abbiamo un aumento di denaro sulla cooperazione internazionale e abbiamo un aumento però di attenzione politica. Nel merito della Libia sapete che stiamo lavorando perché si stabilizzi finalmente il governo, ci sia il blocco delle partenze di questi nostri fratelli e sorelle che tutte le volte che entrano in mare rischiano di morire. Noi siamo molto fieri di salvare la vita a tante persone, ma il mare è il posto peggiore dove salvare le vite e per evitare che il Mediterraneo sia un cimitero occorre bloccare in partenza con una strategia di lungo periodo, ne abbiamo discusso, e anche con alcune misure immediate. Noi siamo molto fieri del lavoro che stiamo facendo, ma sappiamo che questo metodo non potrà andare avanti a lungo. Non potremo pensare di continuare a farci carico sostanzialmente da soli di tutti i problemi della Libia o dell'Africa e da questo punto di vista anche al Consiglio europeo di giovedì e venerdì porremo con forza la questione.
Well, this is an extensive topic of conversation. Let me just make a few points. Number one, it is a strategic interest of the United States to make sure that the migration crisis that's been taking place in Europe is solved. It's a strategic interest because of the terrible loss of life that we see as people attempt to reach Europe, but also because of the distorting effects that it can have on European politics if the sense is that the influx of migration is disorderly, chaotic, and overwhelms European countries. And so we are deeply committed in Europe's success in resolving this issue effectively. Now, obviously there are a lot of contributors to it. So we are very focused on strengthening the government of national accord, as I indicated, and Secretary John Kerry and others are working with his counterparts on a multilateral lateral basis to strengthen the government of national accord, resolve tensions that exist between the different portions of Libya, and then to be able to invest and build in their capacity to control their borders and their waterways, because if we don't have a partner on the other side of the ocean, it's going to continue to be a problem. That's point number one. Point number two, we are deeply appreciative of the generosity and humanitarian impulses of the Italian people in rescuing so many people through Operation Sophia. What we did in Warsaw during the NATO meeting was to indicate that although that is primarily a EU mission, NATO and the United States and our naval assets are prepared to assist in a robust way where appropriate. And it's just a matter of coordinating with Europe to find out, and Italy and other countries, what it is that you need. We will help. The same way that we do with respect to helping to enforce the agreement between Turkey and the European Union on that portion, that body of water. The third point, as Matteo pointed out, is more long-term, and that is trying to help these countries that are having difficulties, where people feel either unstable, insecure, or just hungry and in search of opportunity. How do we help them develop in such a way where people feel that they can succeed and raise their families without fleeing to more developed countries? That is a longer-term proposition, but we have to begin to make the investments now. I mentioned to Matteo, we have obviously different issues with respect to migration, and net migration into this country has actually been flat in some cases even decreased, or we've seen reverse flows, particularly with respect to Mexico. But one area where we have seen a big spike over the last several years is actually from the smaller countries in Central America, where the economy is doing poorly, agriculture is done poorly in part because of changing weather patterns, violence brought on by narco traffickers. So Vice President Biden, I gave him the charge of working with those countries to come up with a development plan. Congress, on a bipartisan basis, supported us putting more money into these countries for development, more effective policing, dealing with fighting the narco traffickers in a more effective way, investing in young people. But that's not going to happen overnight. That will be a decade-long process potentially. In the meantime, we insist that those countries cooperate with us to send a message to their populations that it is a dangerous trip to reach the United States, and if you get here, you're likely to be turned back, to try to discourage this dangerous passage, but also to try to undermine the human traffickers who are preying on the desperation of these people to make money. So all those strategies have to be employed, and the one thing I would encourage is, and I've said this whenever I've visited Europe, you can't have a situation where Italy, Greece, Germany are bearing the entire burden. If in fact you have a European Union, then you're unified not just for the benefits, but also for the costs. And I do think it is important for Europe collectively to be invested in solving this problem and not just leave it to one country. In the same way that here in the United States, obviously, we're an actual nation state as opposed to a union of separate states. But we would not abandon one state and just say, here, you deal with an entire problem. And good luck with that. Right? You know, if we have solidarity and benefit from that solidarity on a whole range of issues, then that means you also have joint responsibilities. Okay? That's what I just said. I said Central America. They've increased, David. Why? No, actually, David, they spiked heavily in 2014, went down significantly in 2015, have gone back up this year in part because there's still desperation in Central America, but are still not at the levels they were in 2014. But I appreciate you shouting out a question, since I'm sure there are a lot of other colleagues of yours who would want to do the same. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.